I wouldn't hide a body for many people, but the people in that middle circle, I would hide a body for them. Yeah, but no, as it goes out, it wouldn't be. You're important, but please don't ask me to hide a body for you because it'll be. Well, maybe we'll talk up when the cameras aren't rolling. I am Christian White, author of The Ledge, published by Affirm Press. So I have to be incredibly vague whenever I say what any of my books are about, really, but this one in particular. So I've been saying two things. The first is it's Stand By Me with a slightly higher body count. That's my little elevator one. My slightly longer one is it's about four teenage boys in the 90s. One of them goes missing, and the other three have to figure out what happened. And then 20-ish years later, those boys are now men and they have to reconnect when human remains are found beneath this ledge where they used to hang out and play. And that's all I can say. That's all. So the rest of this is going to be dead silent. It's a fictional ledge based in sort of rural Victoria, but it's very much based on an actual ledge that I used to go to. I'm not too proud to say this, but I used to wag high school sometimes. And I lived near the beach, so I would walk to this ledge overlooking the beach. And it was a bit of it's just a little bit of just a hangout spot to sit, to be away from everyone and everything, and away from adults, more importantly. But I think most small towns have those places where the teenagers know about, and it's a dilapidated car park or a bush or an old truck stop or something, and there's broken glass and there's homemade bongs and probably a used condom or two. They're not glamorous places, but they're places where teenagers come to sort of either hide or escape or hold counsel or just live in their own little that create their own little Lord of the Flies. So that's sort of what it's a culmination of all of those places. The reason it's set in the 1990s, or at least most of it is set in the 1990s, is because for a couple of reasons, I wanted this to be sort of my love letter to It and Stand By Me and The Goonies and Lord of the Flies and Catcher in the Rye. Really, really early on in the process, I had written on a post-it a coming of age thriller. That's what I wanted to do. And so I set it when I came of age, which was the 1990s. And I started noticing how funny it was that when I was a kid in the 80s and 90s, all these great stories were being told set in the 50s. And now all these great stories are being told set in the 80s and 90s, because I think it's now creators are at an age where we kind of, you romanticize that time in your life, for better or worse. So that's really why it's set there. And it's funny because, originally it was started, like I said, a coming of age thriller. It was sort of this external thing. And then as soon as which happens with every book, I get into the weeds and I start to kind of plug in more and more of myself and draw more and more inspiration from my own childhood. And I started remembering things about my childhood that I thought were lost, and I was, this will shock everyone watching because I'm sure I look like a really cool guy, but I was a dorky teenager, I was not a cool teenager. So I found a very equally dorky and weird misfitish kind of group of teenagers. And we for a while there, I felt like they were kind of essential to my surviving puberty. They were everything, and the adults sort of drift back into the edges. And so I started to think more and more about that and tap more and more into that sort of world. And actually, as I did that, I suddenly started to think, oh, it's kind of depressing that I don't see them anymore. I don't really have any contact with any of those, especially now I've given up social media. I can't even stalk them. I used to at least be able to digitally stalk them, and now I can't even do that. And I started to think about that, and I thought, I wonder what will happen with these boys in my story. And then I sat down and to sort of explore that and wrote what became the first chapter in the book. That's why part of it's set in modern day. And then, of course, what I did then was go back and make it look like that's what I intended the entire time, which is so much of my job, is going back and making it look like I knew what I was doing, which in fact I never really know what I'm doing. Now I don't even know what I'm doing now, really. Much brighter authors than me, when they sit down to write, they think about themes and messages and what they're trying to say. I don't think about any of that in those early stages. I just think about character and then the story, But what I find is when I stop and look back, that's when I kind of figure out what it's about and what I was trying to say. And there's these, as I look back over all of my books, there's these recurring themes, and you kind of get to look inside yourself. And so I wasn't thinking about loyalty at all as I was writing it, but when I finished it and looked back, it's really obvious. So much of it is about loyalty, but specifically this, it's probably a universal thing across all genders, but I think that especially when for a teenage boy in the 90s, loyalty was so important. And it's a really male centric thing as well. Loyalty is so important, but to the point where sometimes you have to compromise your morality in service of that loyalty, or compromise compromise yourself and give a little bit more of yourself in service of that loyalty. So what was really interesting to me in retrospect, and now I think about it all the time, is that line where loyalty bashes up against your sense of sort of ethics and morality and sense of self. And I think that's what the book is about. It's sort of it's one thing pushing against the other, and how the question that emerged really early, and it ended up being kind of a tagline for the book, which is, how far would you go to help your friends? And it's such a good question, because I would do anything for my friends, but I wouldn't really. I wouldn't. I would do anything to a point, and that point was I've got a pretty strong sense of where that point is now. But when you're a teenager, and when you're a teenage boy, that's a hard thing. That's a hard thing to point, especially when all the other boys in the group are saying, no, we've got to do this. We've got to be loyal. So really loyalty became this huge part of what the story is about. But that was, again, all subconscious. Back then I was loyal to, there was probably 3 or 4 boys and 1 or 2 girls in our group. And I was, fiercely loyal to them. And there were politics, and was inner turmoil, and we would fight. But to the outside world, forget it. You're a united front. And to be honest with you, my family's always been like that. It's always been, if you do something wrong or questionable, of course your family's going to turn around and say, hey, you shouldn't have done that. But outwardly, we've always got each other's back, no matter what. And that was so that was a huge thing. And now it's the same. Now it's really family centric. And recently, when you go on book tour, usually it's just me in a room writing, and I'm a dad now, so my whole writing world is between drop off and pick up. So after that, I'm busy and I'm doing these things, but I've been on this book tour, so it means I've been in a hotel room a lot by myself, which means you go for long walks, and you've got all these extra hours in the day. And one of the things I did recently as an exercise was I drew concentric circles on the page, and in that center circle was my wife and daughter, and slightly out is my parents and my siblings. And I was sort of doing, I don't really know why is this exercise, but it's that central circle, the central through few circles, that they're my people. That's where my loyalty lies. So I wouldn't hide a body for many people, but the people in that middle circle, I would hide a body for them. Yeah, but as it goes out, it wouldn't be, you're important, but please don't ask me to hide a body for you, because it'll be well, maybe we'll talk up when the cameras aren't rolling. This one was very similar to all of my books, which is I start with this ironclad perfect, everything's going to be perfect plan, where I think everything works, and I usually have a twist in mind, and it all kind of makes sense, and there's a simple through line. I think about the character arcs, but from a very external place, because I don't really know them yet. It's a very, very broad terms. And then I get into the weeds, maybe at, third of the way through, I suddenly realize, everything I've planned isn't going to work. And that's this kind of, that used to scare me, with my first couple of books, that scared me. The second book in particular, I was really worried about that. Now I expect it, and I actually love it. And what it is that, it does sound pretentious to say, but your characters really do take on a life of their own. And when you start writing them, you get to know them in a way that you can't when you're planning and when you're plotting, So I will always, it's an incredibly frustrating rule at times, but I'll always follow what that character wants to do. Rather than forcing the plot onto them, I will let them lead the way. And what I find is that you have to kill a lot of darlings that way. You might have this great set piece. It's not called set piece. I work in film and TV as well, but in a book, I still call them set pieces. You've got this great moment, this great sequence at the end that you have to just get rid of because the character wouldn't do that thing. And I think that that's just so important as a reader. If I'm reading something, a character is allowed to do something stupid because we all do stupid things, we all make mistakes. But I think even if you're not a writer, and even if you can't identify it, I think most readers know when the writer is making their character do something that they wouldn't. And I think that you emotionally disengage and you feel it. You might not know why you're feeling it, but you're thinking, oh, I might dog ear this page now and go and do something else. And I think for a writer, if you lose that, if they emotionally disengage, that's the worst thing because you've got to work so hard to get them back. And so I think I'm always thinking, follow the character. And really, I write in thrillers, and I write horror films and things like that. But I don't read other crime books. Of course, I read them for the plots and the twist and the cool stories and the scenes, but really, I'm reading it to see what happens to that character. If it's a good book, I'm connected to that character. I want them to survive. I want to see how much will they physically survive? Will they emotionally survive? That's sort of what I'm invested in, and that's where that's why you have to. That's why I always end up following the character, and that always leads to the best twist. A lot of people are talking about the big twist in this book, and that came quite late on. That came through following character and thinking about readers' assumptions and things like that. And then I had a completely different, really a rubbish twist in mind. In hindsight, the original twist was sort of, but by following the character, I found my way there. The Ledge was definitely turned out to be the most personal book I've written. I think partly, the first two books were female protagonists, so there's only a certain amount of, a white guy can bring to that. You inevitably draw inspiration, of course, from yourself and your life, but the third book was when I started with Wild Place. It's the first male protagonist, and he was very similar to me. He had Tourette's, which I've got Tourette's, and I'd never really told anyone or written about it or anything like that. And there was also a kind of a gothy teenager in that book, which was my childhood. So I sort of started to do that, and then with The Ledge, I just continued that trend, but to the next degree. It's about a weird teenager, which I was, and a 43-year-old thriller writer, which I am. So I really had to dig deep in my imagination for this one, which was so good. That it's this weird. It's kind of cathartic. I could write about the feelings of being a teenage boy and coming of age, and that strange time that I remember so clearly, which was I wanted to play with toys. I still wanted to play with toys, but I knew I wasn't supposed to. So I'd play in secret. And that to me is such a pivotal moment that people go through. I've talked to my sister about it. She did the same thing. And I think, oh, how tragic and how juicy as a storyteller that is, So I kind of got to explore all of that. And then being a writer, a full-time writer is a wonderful, beautiful, brilliant job. It's the best job in the world, if you like it. But I don't really get to talk to many people about it. When I hang out with other authors, we'll debrief and things like that. But it's a weird job. And firstly, really, the initial reason I gave my character that job was because I'm lazy. But I didn't want. I was thinking, what's this character gonna? It's really hard to come up with convincing jobs for characters. And I knew that I wanted this guy to go back to his hometown because human remains were found. But I really didn't want him to have to call his boss, hey, Tim, can I get a few days off? I've got to go back to. I just didn't want. That's so boring. And I thought, if there were human remains found in my hometown, I have the kind of job and lifestyle I could just take a few days off. I wouldn't have to check with anyone. So that I'll give him that job. But then, of course, what ends up happening is I thought, it lets me write about the lifestyle of being a writer. There's events where he gets to interact with readers. There's times where he talks about what it's like to be on the road with the book tour and have these full-on social interactions with people, and then you're back at a hotel room in silence, just the clinking cutlery, and I get to explore all of that. So it ended up being in many, many ways just personal and about my life then and my life now. Book writing is my first true deep love. That's what I wanted to do way, way, way back when. I adore screenwriting as well. It sort of emerged from, um, in my 20s, I thought, oh, I want to do this I want to write as a living, and I thought I'll go down both of those paths and see which one hits. Screenwriting and novel writing, and I'm lucky enough that both hit at a similar time. Um, I love them both, but they're the process is sort of similar. It's just me in a room by myself, my X Files poster over here, my little plant over here, writing. Um, but they're different sort of products. A book is for better or worse, it's your thing, and it's still collaborative. You work with. I'm very lucky to work with a brilliant editor and a wonderful publisher, and other people. But at the end of the day, it's got your name on it. It's your thing. Whereas when you write when you write in film and TV, I don't mean this in a cynical way. You're part of a larger machine. It's wildly collaborative. You're working with producers and then director and cast, and you'll have to do things like, well, we need to rewrite this scene because for budget reasons. So there are these really great limitations, which I weirdly love writing within limitations because it forces you to do your best work. And in a book, you can write whatever. You can write a scene on the moon if you want. I haven't written a scene on the moon, but you don't have to think about things like that. But I quite like thinking about things like that, those limitations. So both have their unique challenges. But book is my true love. The great thing about a film and TV though is that if it comes out and people don't like it, you can say, yeah, I know that wasn't, the script was perfect. It was all the other people who did it. I had nothing to do. I'll just dust my hands. That's the best thing about it, really. Once upon a time, before I was a dad, I would sit at my desk for as long as I wanted, and I would procrastinate, and I would kind of, day would drift into night, and it wouldn't really matter. I would get hungry, and so I would eat. But now being a dad, I've had to completely rearrange my life for sort of two reasons. So one is the practical reason, which is, my daughter's at school. I drop her off from school, I pick her up from school. I just get all my work done, in that middle time. I've rented an office away from home, and that's really one of the things I've had to change. For the second reason is that I really care about work-life balance for myself, but also for my daughter. So early on, my wife commented and said, sometimes you just disappear, and we always know that you're just in your office working. And I would just sort of drift in there after dinner or whatever, and I'd just be tinkering. And that didn't sit well with me. I didn't like the idea of my daughter not knowing where I was, or her knowing that my attention's drawn somewhere else. I really wanted to be present in her life, and I wanted to be present. I want to see everything. I don't want to miss anything. And that's good for my own mental health as well. So I rented this office, and now I just, all my work between drop off and pick up, and I've sort of trained my brain to not switch off. I can't switch it off. I do have to slip out and write ideas down to myself, but I've trained myself to just be in the moment and exist in this reality for while I'm not writing, which I think has been such a huge thing to me. That was one of the reasons I went off social media as well. It's just about just being about mental health, and making my job, and which is my love, and it's a cool job, but making that a part of my life, not my life, And so that's that's all these changes that have been happening, and I'm a better human for it, I think. Still work in progress, like we all are, but I'm getting there. I certainly read lots in my genre, because one of the great things about becoming a published author is people send you all this stuff before it's released because they want a blurb, they want you to endorse it. So I read a lot of that, but I don't want that to feel like work. I never want reading to feel like work. So now I read one book that someone sent me, and then one or two of my own. And when I read a pretty broad range. I read horror, of course, but I love some literary fiction. I love Haruki Murakami. He's got one coming out soon, and I'm desperate for it. I'm trying not to read anything about it. And I will pick up, we've got a bench near our house where people put, all their secondhand books and things. They just dump them there. And every time I walk past there, I'll just often just pick something up that I would never have thought. Recently the last thing I read was Primal Fear, which is sort of a courtroom thriller drama. They made a film out of it, a great film with Edward Norton and Richard Gere. The book was written in the 80s, and I thought, oh, I guess I'll just read this. And it was amazing. And, it was incredible. So I tried just to read as broad as possible. I don't like to, I don't want to just read just in my genre. I don't want that just to be it. I do, when I'm writing though, I do have an issue with, if I'm writing first person past tense, I'll tend to only read books that are in first person past tense because it messes with me. If I read something in present tense in particular, it's just hard for me to go, back and forth to the page. But outside of that, I don't have any limitations. I just read and watch just as broader, comedy, and I just try to watch as many different things as I can. I'm about quarter of the way, maybe halfway through book 5. It's just called book 5 right now. I'm not great with titles, so I really hope that when it comes out, it has a different title. It's not called book 5. If it's called book 5, something's gone wrong. Actually, with The Ledge, early on, my publisher Martin said, "Oh yeah, the book's great, but the title feels very generic and boring. Let's come up with a better title." And I remember saying, if it's called The Ledge, we've failed. And then, of course, it's called The Ledge. So who knows? But book 5 is next. I also have I've had a film just come out called Apartment 7A. That's just come out on Binge. And I'm doing some other fun film and TV stuff. A really cool TV project that I'm not allowed to talk about. But yeah, so busy, a very busy, set to be a very busy 2025. I'm determined though not to take so long with my next book. Wild Place came out in 2021 and then The Ledge in 2024, which I think is a bit of an unreasonable amount of time to make people wait. So I want to hurry up and get book 5 written, but it feels great at the minute, but I haven't hit that inevitable, oh God, it's all going to fail moment, which is coming, I'm sure. Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure. You know how much I love you guys and love the shop. So thank you very much for having me.